Saturday, May the 1st. Grandma rang with her annual gibberish about cast ne'er a clout. I know it's got something to do with keeping your vest on, but so what? I keep my vest on all the year round anyway. Britain has bombed Port Stanley Airport and put it out of action. Sunday, May the 2nd, 3rd after Easter. Went round to Nigel's and was astounded to hear that his parents are trying to emigrate to Australia. How could any English person want to live abroad? Foreigners can't help living abroad because they were born there, but for an English person to go is ridiculous, especially now that suntan lamps are so readily available. Nigel agrees with me. He asked me if he could stay behind and live at our house. I warned him about the poor standard of living, but he said he would bring all his consumer durables with him. Monday, May the 3rd. May Day holiday. UK except Scotland. Bank holiday, Scotland. This morning I spent half an hour in the bathroom studying my nose, after my so-called best friend Nigel asked me last night if I realised I was a Dustin Hoffman look-alike. I hadn't realised that my nose had grown to such an abnormal size, but the more I looked at it, the more I could see that it is huge. My mother bashed on the door and shouted, "Whatever you're doing in there, stop it at once and come down and eat your breakfast. Your cornflakes are getting soggy." When I got downstairs, I asked my mother if I reminded her of Dustin Hoffman. She said, "You should be so lucky, dearie." Tuesday, May the 4th. My mother has stopped wearing a bra. Her bust looks like 2 poached eggs that have been cooked for too long. I wish she wouldn't wear such tight T-shirts. It's not dignified in somebody her age. 37. Wednesday, May the 5th. A strange phone call. The phone rang and I picked it up, but before I could say our number, a posh woman said, "Clinic here. You have an appointment with us on Friday at 2 p.m. Will you be able to keep the appointment, Mrs. Mole?" I said, "Yes," in a falsetto voice. "You will be with us for 2 hours. During that time you will see 2 doctors and a counsellor who is very experienced in your particular problem," she said mechanically. I said, "Thank you," in a high-pitched squeak. She went on, "Please bring a sample of urine with you. A small sample, no full-to-the-brim pickle jars, please." "All right," I croaked. "Don't upset yourself, Mrs. Mole," the woman said slushily. "We are here to help, you know." Then she said, "Please don't forget our fee. It will be £42 for your initial consultation." "No," I whispered. "So, Friday at 2 o'clock. Please be punctual." Then she put the phone down. What does it all mean? My mother has not said anything about being ill. What is her particular problem? Which clinic? Thursday, May the 6th. I heard some very yucky woman talking on Radio 4 tonight about how she became a millionairess from writing romantic fiction books. She said that women readers like books about doctors and electronics wizards and people like that. I am going to have a go myself. I could do with £1 million. The woman said it is important for an author of romantic fiction to have an evocative name. So, after much thought, I have decided to call myself Adrian Storm. I have already written half the first page. Longing for Wolverhampton by Adrian Storm. Jason Westmoreland's copper-flecked eyes glanced cynically around the terrace. He was sick of Capri and longed for Wolverhampton. He flexed his remaining fingers and examined them critically. The accident with the chainsaw had ended his brilliant career in electronics. His days were now devoid of microchips. There was a yawning chasm in his life. He had tried to fill it with travel and self-gratification, but nothing could blot out the memories he had of Gardenia Featherington, the virginal plastic surgeon at St. Booper's in Wolverhampton. Jason brooded, blindly blinking back big blurry tears. Friday, May the 7th. My mother and father were having a discussion about feminism in the car on the way to Sainsbury's this evening. My father said that since my mother's consciousness had been raised, he had noticed that she had lost 2 inches round her bust. My mother said angrily, "What have my breasts got to do with anything?" There was a silence. Then she said, "But don't you think I have grown as a person, George?" My father said, "On the contrary, Pauline, you are much smaller since you stopped wearing high heels." Me and my father laughed quite a lot, but not for long because my mother gave us one of her powerful glances. Then she looked out of the car window. She had a few tears in her eyes. She looked at me and said, "If only I had a daughter to talk to." My father said, "We can't take the risk of having another baby like Adrian, Pauline." Then they began to talk about my babyhood. They made me sound like Damien in the film of The Omen. My mother said, "It's that bloody Dr. Spock's fault that Adrian has turned out like he has." I said, "What have I turned out like?" My mother said, "You're an anal retentive, aren't you?" And my father said, "You're tight-fisted and you've always got your perfectly groomed head in a book." I was so shocked I couldn't speak for a bit. But, trying to keep my voice light and melodious, not easy when your heart is pierced with the arrows of criticism, I said, "What sort of son did you want, then?" Their answer took us all around Sainsbury's, through the queue at the checkout and back to the multi-storey car park. My father's ideal son was a natural athlete. He was cheerful and outgoing. He was a fluent linguist. He was tall with ruddy, unblemished cheeks. He took his hat off to ladies. He went fishing with his father and swapped jokes. He was good with his hands and had a hobby making grandfather clocks. He was good officer material. He would vote Conservative and would marry into a good family. He would set up his own computer business in Guildford. However, my mother's ideal son would be intense and saturnine. He would go to a school for the intellectually precocious. He would fascinate girls and women at an early age. He would enthrall visitors with his witty conversation. He would wear his clothes with panache. He would be completely non-sexist, non-ageist, non-racist. His best friend would be an old African woman. He would win a scholarship to Oxford. He would take the place by storm and be written about in future biographies. He would turn down offers of safe parliamentary seats in Britain. Instead, he would go to South Africa and lead the blacks into a successful revolution. He would return to England, where he would be the first man deemed fit to edit Spare Rib. He would move in sparkling social circles. He would take his mother everywhere he went. When they'd both finished spouting on, I said, "Well, I'm sorry if I'm a disappointment to you." My mother said, "It's not your fault, Adrian, it's ours. We should have called you Brett." Saturday, May the 8th. Full moon. I needed to talk to somebody about my sense of inferiority, which grew even bigger in the night as I lay awake and thought about Brett Mole, the phantom son. So I went to Grandma's. She showed me my baby photos. I must admit that I was a bit grotesque. I was completely bald until I was 2, and I always had a dead fierce expression on my face. Now I know why my mother hasn't got a Technicolor gilt frame photograph of me on top of our television like other mothers. But I'm glad I went to Grandma's. She thinks everything about me is brilliant. I told her about Brett Mole, the boy that never was. She said, "He sounds a right nasty piece of work to me. I'm glad you didn't turn out like him." Grandma had a bit of arthritis in her shoulder, so she took her dress off and I sprayed Ralgex on the pain. Grandma's corset looks like a parachute harness. I asked her how she gets in and out of it. She told me it was all down to self-discipline. She has got a theory that since corsets went out of fashion, England has lost its backbone. Sunday, May the 9th. 4th after Easter, Mother's Day, USA and Canada. I have just realised that I have never seen a dead body or a real female nipple. This is what comes of living in a cul-de-sac. Monday, May the 10th. I asked Pandora to show me one of her nipples, but she refused. I tried to explain that it was in the interests of widening my life experience, but she buttoned her cardigan up to the neck and went home. Tuesday, May the 11th. We did diabetes in human biology today. Mr. Dewar taught us to measure our blood sugar level by testing our wee. This reminded me that I forgot to tell my mother about her appointment at the clinic. Still, I don't suppose it was important. Wednesday, May the 12th. I received the following letter from Pandora this morning. Adrian, I am writing to terminate our relationship. Our love was once a spiritual thing. We were united in our appreciation of art and literature, but Adrian, you have changed. You have become morbidly fixated with my body. Your request to look at my left nipple last night finally convinced me that we must part. Do not contact me. Pandora Braithwaite. P.S. If I were you, I would seek professional psychiatric help for your hypochondria and your sex mania. Anthony Perkins, who played the maniac in Psycho, was in analysis for 10 years, so there is no need to be ashamed. Thursday, May the 13th. Yesterday, before I opened that letter, I was a normal type of intellectual teenager. Today, I know what it is to suffer. I am now an adult. I am no longer young. In fact, I have noticed wrinkles forming on my forehead. I wouldn't be surprised if my hair doesn't turn white overnight. I am in total anguish. I love her. I love her. I love her. Oh, God. Oh, Pandora. 3 a.m. I have used a whole Andrex toilet roll to mop up my tears. I haven't cried so much since the wind blew my candy floss away at Cleethorpes. 5 a.m. I slept fitfully, then got out of bed to watch the dawn break. The world is no longer exciting and colourful. It is grey and full of heartbreak. I thought of doing myself in, but it's not really fair on the people you leave behind. It would upset my mother to come into my room and find my corpse. I shan't bother doing my O-levels. I'll be an intellectual road sweeper. I will surprise little-outs by quoting Kafka as they pass me by. Friday, May the 14th. Why, oh why, did I ask Pandora to show me her nipple? Anybody's nipple would have done. Nigel says that Sharon Bott will show everything for 50p and a pound of grapes. I have written Pandora a short note. Pandora, darling, what can I say? I was crude and clumsy and should have known you would run from me like a startled fawn. Please, at least grant me an audience and let me apologise in person. Yours with unvanquished love, Adrian. I think it hits the right note. I got the startled fawn bit from one of Grandma's yucky romantic novels. I have sprayed a bit of my mother's tramp perfume onto the envelope, and I will deliver it by hand after dark tonight. Tramp! Fancy calling a perfume tramp! Ha ha ha! Saturday, May the 15th. Scottish Quarter Day. There were a lot of visitors at Pandora's house. I could hardly get up the drive for Jaguars and Rovers and Volvos. At first I thought there had been a death in the family because I could see 2 nuns and a priest eating sausage rolls in the kitchen. Then a gorilla walked in and took a bottle of wine out of the fridge, so I realised it must be a fancy dress party. I hid behind the summer house so that I could get a better view. There was a cowboy and a devil talking in one bedroom, and a frogman and 3 gypsies laughing in another. A knight in armour was clanking about in the garden. He was being followed by a cave woman who was shouting, "Stand still, Damien, I've found a tin opener!" Assorted fairies and Kermits and clowns were dancing downstairs. Then the gorilla burst in and started dancing with a belly dancer who was wearing a most disgusting flimsy costume which showed her navel and most of her nipples. The belly dancer kept her yashmak on, which I thought was hypocritical, as if anybody was interested in looking at her face. I couldn't see Pandora anywhere, so after about half an hour, I ran up to the door and put my letter through the letterbox. As I turned to run back down the drive, Toulouse-Lautrec shuffled out and was sick in one of the bay tree tubs. I got home to find Queen Victoria and Prince Albert in our kitchen. Queen Victoria said, "We're going to the Braithwaites." Prince Albert said, "The dog needs feeding." Then they swept regally out of the kitchen and up the road to Pandora's. Nobody tells me anything in this house. Sunday, May the 16th. Rogation Sunday, moon's last quarter. 3 p.m. My mother keeps being sick. It serves her right for staying out until 4 a.m. drinking. My father is still in bed, but he will have to get up soon. He has promised to take Grandma to the garden centre after tea. 7 p.m. Garden centres must be the most boring places on earth, yet adults walk around them with expressions of ecstasy on their faces. My grandma bought a dozen rose sticks and a bag of fertiliser and a plastic Cupid urn. My father bought a rose stick called Pauline. He and my mother looked at each other in a sloppy sort of way and held hands over the stick. I left them to it and went and looked at the poisons on the bottom shelves. I was toying with the idea of buying a bottle when Grandma shouted and asked me to come and carry the fertiliser to the car. Thus my mind was torn from thoughts of death. Monday, May the 17th. I was doing my maths homework in the fourth year's cloakroom when I overheard Pandora's confident voice ringing out. Yes, it was a Brillo party, but my dear, I'm rather worried. Claire Nielsen said, "Why is that, Pan?" Pandora said seriously, "I so enjoy dressing up as a belly dancer, even though it's quite against my feminist principles to exhibit my body." Then they moved away down the corridor, gassing about Claire Nielsen's cat who is expecting kittens. So, Pandora, who refused to show me one of her nipples in the privacy of my bedroom, is quite prepared to flaunt both nipples at a mixed gathering. Tuesday, May the 18th. Bumped into Stick Insect in the library. She had her son, Maxwell House, with her. For a thin woman, she certainly looked fat. Maxwell chucked books off the shelves while Stick Insect and I talked about the days when she had been my father's girlfriend. I told her that she had had a lucky escape from my father, but she defended him, saying, "He is another person when he is on his own with me. He is so sweet and kind." Yes, and so was Dr. Jekyll. Got The Condition of the Working Class in England by Frederick Engels out of the library. 10:30 p.m. I have just realised that Stick Insect used the present tense when she was referring to her relationship with my father. It's absolutely disgraceful. A woman of 30 not knowing the fundamentals of grammar. Wednesday, May the 19th. No word from Pandora. When we meet at school, she looks through me as if I were the invisible man. I have asked Nigel where I can find Sharon Bott. I also went to the greengrocer's to find out how much grapes cost per pound. Thursday, May the 20th. Ascension Day. Started reading Fred Engels' book tonight. My father saw me reading it and said, "I don't want that commie rubbish in my house." I said, "It's about the class you came from yourself." My father said, "I have worked and slaved and fought to join the middle classes, Adrian, and now I'm here I don't want my son admiring proles and revolutionaries." He is deluding himself if he thinks he has joined the middle classes. He still puts HP sauce on his toast. Friday, May the 21st. While I was listening to the Archers, my mother asked me if I minded being an only child. I said, on the contrary, I preferred it. Saturday, May the 22nd. My father has just asked me if I would like a sister or a brother. I said neither. Why do they keep drivelling on about kids? I hope they aren't thinking about adopting one. They are terrible parents. Look at me. I'm a complete neurotic. Sunday, May the 23rd. Sunday after Ascension, new moon. I couldn't sleep, so I got up very early and went for a walk past Pandora's house. I thought about her lying in her habitat bed, wearing her Laura Ashley nightgown, and I don't mind admitting that tears sprang to my eyes. However, I dashed them away and went to call on old Bert and Queenie. A wild old woman answered the door. She said, "What have you got me out of bed for?" It was Queenie with her hair on end and no makeup on. I apologised and went home to wake my parents up with a cup of tea. Were they grateful? No. My mother said, "For God's sake, Adrian, it's cockcrow on Sunday morning. Push off and buy the papers or something." I bought the papers, read them, then took them up to my parents. I think the central heating must need turning down because my parents were both very red in the face. As I went out, I heard my mother say, "George, we will have to get a lock on that door." Monday, May the 24th. Victoria Day, Canada. Went to the youth club tonight. Barry Kent was there with his gang, worse luck. Rick Lemon was showing a film about potholing in Derbyshire. I was very interested, but I found it hard to concentrate on it because Barry Kent kept putting his fingers in front of the projector and making rabbits and giraffes and other animal shapes. When Barry Kent had gone to the coffee bar to harass the youth work student behind the counter, I told Rick Lemon about my problems. He said, "Hey, that's bad news, Adrian, but I'm busy tonight. Come and see me at 6 p.m. tomorrow night and we'll have a good rap." I think this means that he wants to talk to me at 6 p.m. tomorrow. Tuesday, May the 25th. Went to Rick's office in the youth club. We had a long talk about my problems. Rick said I was a typical product of the petty bourgeoisie. He said my problems were the result of my generation's alienation from an increasingly urbanized society. He said my parents were morally bankrupt and spiritually dead. He lit a long, loose herbal cigarette and said, "Adrian, loosen up. Don't run with the herd. Try and live your life unfettered by convention." Then he looked at his watch and said, "Christ, I told her I'd be home by 7. We walked outside and he got into his wobbly Citroen and said, "You must come round for supper one night." I asked if he was still squatting in the old tyre factory. He said, "No, we've moved into Badger's Copse, the new Barratt housing estate." I can't decide if I feel better or worse after talking to Rick. On the whole, I think I feel worse. John Knott has announced on the news that one of our ships has been badly damaged. I hope it is not the Canberra. Barry Kent's brother is on it. Wednesday, May the 26th. My mother is pregnant. My mother! I will be the laughing stock at school. How could she do this to me? She is 3 months pregnant already, so in November a baby will be living in this house. I hope they don't expect me to share my room with it. There's no way I'm getting up in the night to give it its bottle. My parents didn't prepare me or anything. We were all eating spaghetti on toast when my father said casually, "Oh, by the way, Adrian, congratulations are in order. Your mother's 3 months pregnant." Congratulations? What about my A-levels in 2 years' time? How can I study with a toddler smashing the place up around me? 10 p.m. Kissed my poor mother good night. She said, "Are you pleased about the baby, Adrian?" I lied and said yes. The ship that went down was the Coventry. It is very sad. I'm glad that my dad got turned down by the War Office. Thursday, May the 27th. Got an airmail letter from Hamish Mancini, the American we met on holiday last year. 1889 West 33rd Street, New York. Hi there, Aid. Phased, huh? Yeah, well, thought I'd communicate. Been feeling kinda unzapped lately. Guess Mom's divorce to number 4 kinda unhinged me some. But Hamish Mancini ain't gonna stick around and take no more adult crap. No sir, Aid. I'm coming over to visit you some. I got finance, I got documentation, I got nothing keeping me here. Tomorrow I get a flight and wowee, I get to see your old British cottage in the ancient Midlands region. We'll promenade around ancient ruins, we'll explore Shakespeare land, huh? I got me some good Lebanon. See you Saturday, buddy. Hamish Mancini. After reading it and rereading it, I think it means that Hamish Mancini is coming to stay with us on Saturday. I wish I hadn't told him that I lived in a thatched cottage. I haven't told my parents yet. My mother said he ruined her adulterous holiday avec Lucas with his constant yapping. Friday, May the 28th. Dentist's after school for a false tooth fitting. He took advantage of my weak position in the dentist's chair to make disparaging remarks about British teeth. His assistant is from Malaya, so they are both bitter about having lived under the colonial jungle boot. I walked home slowly. I was dreading breaking the news about Hamish Mancini's arrival. The dog met me halfway up the cul-de-sac. It was nice to see its happy face. When I got in, I made a big fuss over my poor pregnant mother. I made her a cup of coffee and insisted she put her feet up on the sofa. I put a cushion behind her head and gave her the Radio Times to read. I've seen it done in old films. Cary Grant did it to Doris Day. My mother said, "It's very kind of you, Adrian, but I can only sit down for a few minutes. I'm playing squash in half an hour." But she was in a good mood, so I told her about Hamish. She rolled her eyes a bit and pulled her lips tight, but she didn't go mad, so perhaps being with child has improved her temper. Saturday, May the 29th. Moon's first quarter. 11:30 p.m. The spare room is prepared. The pantry is full of tinned pumpkin pie. The freezer is bursting with pork grits and corn on the cob and pot roasts. The bathroom has been cleaned to American hygiene standards. The dog has been brushed. But Hamish Mancini is not here. We watched the 9 o'clock news, but no airliners had crashed into the Atlantic today, or any other day this week. At 11 p.m. my father said, "Well, I'm not sitting around in my best clothes a minute longer." So we all took our best clothes off and went to bed. 5 a.m. Hamish Mancini is in the spare room. He is playing Appalachian Mountain songs on his steel guitar. He got a taxi from Heathrow Airport, 130 miles. The taxi driver found our house all right, but Hamish refused to believe that it was the right address and made the poor bloke drive round our suburb looking for a thatched cottage. Eventually, the taxi driver drove back to our house and got my father out of bed. Hamish paid the worn-out taxi driver with dollar bills. Sunday, May the 30th. Whit Sunday. Hamish made a terrible faux pas at breakfast. He asked my mother, "Hey, Pauline, where's that guy Lucas?" There was an awful silence. Then my father said coldly, "My wife and Mr. Lucas are no longer friends." But Hamish went on. "Gee, that's too bad. Mr. Lucas was cool, you know. What happened?" My mother said, "We don't usually talk about personal matters at breakfast. Not in England," she added. He said, "Wow, that great British Reserve I've heard about." He seemed really happy, as if he'd found a whole village full of thatched cottages. In the afternoon we took him to see Bert and Queenie. He was beside himself with joy. On the way back in the car, he kept saying, "Jesus, a genuine Derby," he pronounced it to rhyme with Herbie, "and Joan." I went to bed at 10 p.m., worn out with his constant enthusiastic exclamations. Monday, May the 31st. Spring holiday, except Scotland. Bank holiday, Scotland. Memorial Day, USA. We took Hamish to the fun fair on our recreation ground. For once, Hamish looked a bit subdued. He said, "I guess Disneyland has kind of given me a false expectation of enjoyment level." He took my mother on the Dodgems, and I went on the flying whiplash with my father. I was dumbstruck with terror. So was my father. I was okay until I looked down and saw the moron working the machinery. He looked like a Neanderthal man in denims, and I had put my life in his clumsy paws. My father had aged 10 years by the time he got off the flying whiplash, but when my mother asked him if he had enjoyed himself, he said, "It was grand." Our dog has become Hamish's devoted companion. It follows him wherever he goes. Hamish calls our dog Old Blue and sings its sickly songs about American dogs who sit on their dead masters' graves. It makes me sick to see how easily the dog's affections are bought.